This place isn't for you. Leave, before you stain it further. The words sliced through the royal gala louder than the orchestra, and before anyone could blink, the Duchess's hand struck a slap so sharp it echoed against marble and crystal. The ballroom froze. Forks paused mid-air. Champagne flutes trembled. Even the chandeliers seemed to shudder, light scattering like broken glass across the velvet floor. Two women stood at the epicenter of silence. On one side, the Duchess, white, young, the darling of Europe's aristocracy. She wore a scarlet dress so short it glittered like fire each time she moved. Diamonds swung from her ears, catching the light as if the universe itself conspired to spotlight her cruelty. Her smirk wasn't careless, it was calculated. This was dominance, staged for applause. On the other side, the woman in orange, a black figure in a floor-length gown, the color of embers after midnight. No crown, no security detail, no jewels dripping from her neck. Her hair pulled back into a clean, deliberate line. Her only weapon was stillness, and yet the air bent toward her as though the gala belonged to her pulse alone. The Duchess believed she had ended the moment with her hand, but it was just the beginning. The crowd gasped, murmured, shifted uneasily. Some hands hovered above phones, ready to record. A young reporter in the corner whispered, almost in disbelief, "They just struck the wrong person." But the Duchess doubled down, her voice sharp as glass. "Guards, remove her, now." The black uniformed men stirred. For them, titles outweighed truth. For now, the woman in orange did not raise her voice. She did not touch her stinging cheek. She adjusted the fall of her gown, as if she were resetting gravity itself. Her silence thundered. In that instant, the royal gala was no longer a ballroom. It was a courtroom. Every guest became a witness. Every chandelier became a spotlight. Every second stretched into judgment. And somewhere between outrage and awe, the crowd realized this wasn't just about a slap. This was about belonging. About who is allowed to stand inside gilded walls and who is forced out. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now back to her. Back to the woman in orange, because she wasn't just another guest at the Duchess's gala. She was the storm the Duchess had just summoned. The Duchess's order cracked like a whip. "Guards, remove her, now." Two men in tailored black uniforms moved across the marble floor. Their shoes clicked in sync, polished like weapons, their faces blank, trained to obey titles, not truths. The crowd parted nervously. Sequined gowns shifted, tuxedos leaned back. Some guests whispered approval, eager to see the spectacle continue. Others glanced uneasily at the woman in orange, unsure if they were watching justice or a mistake that would stain the gala's legacy. But the Duchess only grew louder, feeding on the silence. "This gala is for people of heritage, not imposters. Take her out before she embarrasses herself further." The woman in orange remained still. She didn't flinch. She didn't step back. Instead, she lifted her chin ever so slightly, an act so small it changed the geometry of the room. Suddenly, the guards looked like pawns approaching a queen. From the corner, a young journalist adjusted her camera lens. Her voice trembled, but her conviction sharpened. "She's not an imposter. I've seen her face before, I swear." But before she could finish, another guest, an elderly patron draped in pearls, cut her off. "Quiet, girl. Do you know who you're contradicting? That's the Duchess." "Oh." The journalist lowered her eyes, but her phone was already recording, red light glowing like a witness that would not be silenced. The guards reached the woman in orange. One reached for her wrist, the other for her clutch. And that was when the tension broke. Gasps erupted as the clutch, a simple black piece of leather, nothing flashy, was ripped from her hands and tossed onto the floor. It landed with a dull thud against marble, the sound too crude for such an elegant room. The Duchess laughed lightly, her crimson lips curling. "See? Nothing of value, nothing but pretense." But the woman in orange did not move to pick it up. She let it lie there, like bait, like proof. Her stillness was not defeat, it was indictment. The orchestra at the far end of the hall began to falter, bows hovering above strings, waiting for permission to play again. But there was no music now, only the sound of judgment, carried in whispers. Who is she really? Why doesn't she fight back? Why does she look unshaken? The Duchess mistook their unease for validation. She lifted her champagne flute high, her laughter slicing through the discomfort. Royal blood is not for sale. Money doesn't buy grace. And some people, she tilted her glass toward the woman in orange, will never belong. But what the Duchess couldn't see was how the room had already begun to shift. The whispers were no longer agreement. They were doubt. The cameras were no longer discreet. They were deliberate. And the woman in orange? She hadn't said a single word yet. But when she finally did, the night would break in half. The clutch still lay on the marble, abandoned like discarded evidence. No one dared touch it. No one, except the woman it belonged to. But she didn't move. Instead, she reached into the folds of her burnt orange gown and drew out a slim black phone. Nothing extravagant, just glass, steel, and silence. Her thumb hovered once, pressed, and released. The screen lit briefly. A single message sent. Protocol. Activated. The gesture was so small, so precise, that half the room missed it. But the few who noticed held their breath, because it wasn't the gesture of a guest scrambling for proof. It was the gesture of someone pressing a detonator. The Duchess tilted her head, amused. Really? Calling for help? Do you think anyone here will believe you? She laughed, eyes sweeping the ballroom like a queen surveying her court. Look at her. Still pretending, still clinging to dignity she doesn't own. The guards stood frozen, uncertain. They'd taken the clutch. They'd followed orders, but something in the woman's composure unnerved them. As if she wasn't the intruder. As if they were. Across the room, the young journalist whispered into her phone mic, voice barely steady. She just signaled someone. This isn't over. The Duchess caught it. Her smirk hardened into a sneer. Signal all you want. You can't summon respect. You either have it or you don't. But at that very moment, the first vibration echoed in the Duchess's own world. A man in a tailored suit, one of the event managers, hurried toward her, phone in hand, his face drained of color. He leaned close, whispering urgently. Her smile faltered. Just for a second. The woman in orange hadn't moved. She hadn't spoken. But cracks had already begun to crawl across the Duchess's illusion of control. A guest near the champagne bar murmured, "Why does she look like she knows something?" Another replied, "Because she does." Still, the Duchess fought for dominance. She raised her voice, loud enough for the cameras now clearly filming. "You see? She calls shadows, but shadows don't change bloodlines. Guards escort her out before this farce grows." The woman in orange finally lifted her gaze. Her eyes, calm and cutting, met the Duchess's. "You've mistaken silence for submission." The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They landed heavier than the slap. The room rippled. Guests leaned forward, phones tilted higher. And in that moment, the gala no longer belonged to the Duchess. It belonged to the voice that had barely spoken at all. The line hung in the air like a blade. "You've mistaken silence for submission." The Duchess blinked, caught off guard, but quickly recovered with a scoff. "Pretty words for a pretender. They won't save you." Yet something had shifted. The crowd wasn't laughing with her anymore. They were watching closer, sharper, hungrier. From the corner of the ballroom, the young journalist raised her phone higher. The red light glowed steady now, no longer trembling. "This is going live," she whispered. "People need to see this." Across the room, a silver-haired gentleman in a navy tux leaned toward his wife. "I've seen her before. Not here. In the papers. She's not who they think she is." His wife frowned, tugging at her pearls. "Then why isn't she defending herself?" The man shook his head. "Because she doesn't have to." Meanwhile, a pair of students, guests of a sponsor, standing near the back, pulled out their phones and started recording, too. Their screens caught the Duchess, red dress gleaming like a warning flare, and the woman in orange, still as stone yet impossibly commanding. The whispering spread like fire through velvet curtains. "Who is she? Why isn't the Duchess winning this? Something's wrong, I can feel it." The Duchess sensed the doubt and snapped, her voice louder, sharper. "Do not be fooled. This woman is nothing. Security, do your job." But the guards hesitated. They looked at the clutch lying on the floor, then at the woman in orange, then back at the Duchess. Their training said one thing. Their instincts whispered another. Then came the first voice from the crowd, clear, cutting, undeniable. A middle-aged man in a tailored suit stepped forward, phone raised. "Enough. We all saw you strike her. That is not dignity. That is desperation." Gasps scattered. The Duchess spun toward him, eyes flashing. "You dare contradict me?" But before she could lash further, the young journalist spoke again, louder this time. The world is watching, and they'll see exactly who you chose to humiliate tonight. The Duchess's laughter rang brittle now, no longer effortless. She raised her glass, voice dripping disdain. Cameras don't change the truth. And that was when the woman in orange finally bent down not to collect her clutch, but to set it upright carefully on the marble, like restoring balance to a fallen scale. She straightened slowly, her eyes sweeping the room. Truth doesn't need a camera, she said. It needs witnesses, and you've just created plenty. The hall erupted, not in applause, not yet, but in the kind of murmurs that signal an empire beginning to crumble. And for the first time that night, the Duchess's hand trembled against the stem of her champagne glass. The ballroom had turned into an arena. Half the crowd craned forward, phones glowing like tiny lanterns. The other half crossed their arms, clinging to the Duchess's authority as if their own status depended on it. And then the event manager appeared, a pale man in a velvet suit, sweat beading at his temples. He pushed through the crowd and bowed low before the Duchess. "Your Grace, forgive the disruption. We'll escort her out immediately." The Duchess smirked, finally regaining her footing. "Do it. End this charade." He turned toward the woman in orange, voice louder now, rehearsed in authority. "Madam, this gala is reserved for select guests of the highest rank. Your presence is unauthorized. Please leave or be removed." A murmur of agreement rolled through a pocket of the audience. A noblewoman in emerald silk raised her chin. "It's disgraceful sneaking into a royal gala dressed like that." But just as quickly, another voice cut across the hall. The journalist, braver now. "She didn't sneak in. You struck her before anyone asked her name." The noblewoman glared. "And what do you know? You're no one." The journalist's phone stayed steady. "Maybe, but the world behind this camera isn't no one, and they're watching you." The crowd rippled. Tension coiled tighter. Guests shuffled, caught between fear of the Duchess and suspicion of the truth unraveling before them. The Duchess raised her glass again, her voice mocking. "See? This is what happens when pretenders are given a stage. They infect the room with noise." The manager nodded frantically. "Guards, escort her out now. The Duchess's word is final." The guards moved again, slower this time, each step weighed down by hesitation. One reached for the woman's shoulder. The other leaned toward her clutch, as if reclaiming evidence. But before contact was made, a new voice broke the hall. A man in his 60s, silver hair combed back, stepped forward. His voice boomed with the gravitas of someone used to being obeyed. "Final? Nothing here is final. Not when you humiliate a guest without proof." The Duchess's eyes narrowed. "Lord Ashton, you'd defend a fraud over me?" He met her gaze without blinking. "I'd defend dignity over arrogance." "Oh." The ballroom erupted in whispers. Lines were being drawn. Some nobles glared at Ashton with disgust. Others nodded subtly, relieved someone had spoken what they were afraid to. And through it all, the woman in orange stood still, her silence louder than every shout, every defense, every insult. The Duchess turned back to her, fury flickering in her eyes. "Why don't you speak? Why don't you tell them who you are if you're so powerful?" The woman in orange finally lifted her head, eyes locked on the Duchess. "Because every second you fill this room with contempt," she said softly, "you dig your own grave. I don't need to bury you. You're doing it yourself." The words struck harder than the slap had. The crowd froze again, half in awe, half in rage, and the divide in the royal gala was complete. The Duchess's smile had hardened into something venomous. Her glass clinked against the edge of the table, sharp enough to slice the room's fragile quiet. "Enough games," she spat. "If she will not leave, then strip her invitation. Now." The event manager hesitated, fumbling with a gold-embossed ledger at the podium. Pages fluttered beneath his trembling fingers. I don't see her name." The Duchess pounced, her voice soaring across the chandeliers. "Of course you don't, because she doesn't belong here." She forged her way in. Gasps swept the hall. Heads turned. Phones tilted higher. And then came the insult that cracked the marble floor more than the slap had. The manager seized the black clutch from where it had been set upright and held it high like evidence in a trial. "This accessory worthless, a cheap imitation, proof she is no guest of honor but a fraud." The Duchess's laughter rang out, brittle and cruel, a pretender in borrowed fabric, hoping to shine in a room built for bloodlines. She leaned closer, her words like poison meant for everyone to hear. "You look like a queen in costume, but you'll leave like a servant." The words echoed through the chamber, amplified by marble and malice. The woman in orange did not reach for the clutch. She did not defend its worth. Her gaze held steady, her silence again louder than the storm around her. But the room could feel it. The insult had crossed a line. Guests shifted uneasily. One whispered, "They're going too far." Another muttered, "This is dangerous if she is who I think she is." But the Duchess ignored the murmurs. She basked in her performance, as though humiliation were theater and cruelty, applause. The guards stepped forward once more, emboldened by the spectacle. One gripped the clutch tighter, fingers digging into its leather like it was contraband. The other reached for the woman's arm. That was when the young journalist's voice rang out, loud, shaking but unstoppable. "I recorded everything, the slap, the insult, the theft. The world will see it all." All eyes snapped to her. Phones followed. Guests gasped. The Duchess's smirk flickered, just for a breath. Then she snapped back, venom flooding her voice. "Do you think anyone will believe your little stream over centuries of royal truth? Delete it or lose your press badge forever." Ugh. The journalist held her ground. "Delete it? Number, I'll send it wider." A murmur rippled again, louder this time. The tide was shifting. The Duchess raised her glass higher, forcing a laugh, trying to reassert her crown of control. "Then let the world see her, see a fraud caught red-handed. Because by the time this night ends, she will be nothing." The clutch, still gripped like stolen goods, trembled under the guard's tightening hand. And in that fragile moment, the room knew. The humiliation wasn't finished. It was only climbing toward a breaking point. The gala had grown electric. Every chandelier sparkled like lightning trapped in crystal, every phone camera a witness waiting to strike. And then, with a nod from the Duchess, the event manager acted. He strode to the podium, voice trembling but loud enough to pierce the hall. "Strike her name from the registry. Effective immediately." He jabbed at the digital guest list displayed on the golden tablet. One tap, two taps, then a final swipe. The screen blinked. Her entry disappeared. Gasps exploded across the ballroom. A guest muttered, "They erased her like she was never here." Another clutched her pearls. "That's not just insult, that's erasure." The Duchess leaned back in satisfaction, her crimson dress glowing under the lights like a flame fed by cruelty. "See? No record, no proof. She was never a guest. Only an intruder pretending at grace." The guard holding the clutch slammed it onto the floor again. This time he pressed the toe of his boot into the leather, grinding it as though crushing the last trace of dignity. The hall recoiled. A silence heavy enough to bend metal settled in. Then came the order, colder, sharper, irreversible. The Duchess lifted her glass, voice smooth as silk but twice as deadly. "Escort her out. Drag her if you must. Let every guest see what happens to those who dare trespass." The guards obeyed. One seized the woman's arm, rough fingers tightening like shackles. The other stepped closer, ready to haul her toward the velvet doors. Gasps turned into cries. The young journalist screamed above the noise. "Stop! You're dragging a woman who hasn't raised her voice once. You're destroying yourselves." But her words collided with the Duchess's laughter. "Destroying ourselves? No, darling. We're protecting royalty from pretenders." The woman in orange swayed only slightly under the guard's grip. She didn't resist. She didn't pull back. She simply looked at the Duchess, calm eyes locking onto her predator. And in that unflinching gaze, the room felt a tremor, an unease that whispered, "Something is about to give." The Duchess, emboldened, stepped forward, her red heels striking marble like war drums. She leaned close enough for only the front rows to hear, but her words cut through the room anyway. "You will crawl out of here, and when you do, you'll remember the night a Duchess reminded you of your place." The woman in orange tilted her head slightly, almost pitying. Her lips parted, her voice low, steady, deliberate. "And you'll remember the night you lost yours." The crowd stiffened, phones lifted higher, the air thickened with anticipation, because everyone knew this was the last breath before the storm broke. The guard's grip dug deeper into her arm. Gasps swelled through the crowd, echoing like waves against marble. The Duchess stood taller, her red dress blazing like a victory flag. But then the woman in orange moved, not violently, not in struggle, simply with purpose. Her free hand slipped once more into the folds of her gown. A phone emerged, sleek, black, cold as obsidian. She raised it to her lips with the calm of someone making a dinner reservation. "Rachel," she said, her voice steady, audible enough for the nearest guests. Log this moment. Activate full protocol and patch the board in. The ballroom stilled. Not because anyone understood what she meant, but because of how she said it measured, commanding, practiced. The guard holding her faltered, fingers loosening. He glanced at the Duchess, unsure. The Duchess scoffed, masking unease with venom. Really? Summoning imaginary allies? No one here will save you. But the phone crackled back, a woman's voice, crisp, confident, undeniable. Understood. Protocol initiated. The board has been alerted. Live stream secured. We're recording. The room erupted in whispers. Phones tilted higher. Guests turned to one another in shock. The board? What board? She has a team. Wait, who is she really? The Duchess's smirk faltered. Her glass wavered in her hand. A stunt. A parlor trick. Nothing more, she hissed. But the cracks were showing. The woman in orange didn't address her. She kept her gaze forward, her voice calm as marble. Rachel, escalate every insult, every action, real-time transmission. Already in motion, came the reply. The event manager's face drained of color. He clutched the guest list tablet tighter, as if it could shield him from what was unraveling. A duke in the second row leaned to his companion, whispering with urgency, "She's no imposter. This is power." The guard stepped back now, releasing her arm as though it burned. The clutch remained crushed under the other's boot, but even he hesitated, sensing the ground beneath him shift. And then, for the first time, the woman in orange turned fully to the Duchess. Her words were quiet, but they cut sharper than the slap she had endured. "You erased my name from a guest list. In the next breath, I'll erase yours from history." The crowd gasped as if struck themselves. Phones captured every syllable. The journalist's live stream flooded with comments, the numbers climbing into the tens of thousands. The Duchess tried to laugh, but it cracked in her throat. "You threaten royalty?" The woman in orange stepped forward, each heel click echoing like a gavel strike. "Number, I correct arrogance, and tonight, the correction has begun." The gala no longer felt like a ballroom. It felt like a boardroom, and the woman in orange had just taken the chair at its head. The ballroom trembled with whispers. Phones hovered like restless fireflies, catching every angle, every breath. The Duchess, though still cloaked in red silk and arrogance, had begun to fray at the edges. Her laughter no longer rang with power, it cracked with desperation. The woman in orange, however, had only grown taller in silence. She raised her phone once more, her voice low but resonant, carrying into every corner of the hall. "Rachel, confirm position, and put them on speaker." The reply was instant, sharp as glass. "Confirmed. The board is live. 3 members already connected. You're broadcasting now." The Duchess blinked, her glass lowering. "Board? What board?" The journalist whispered fiercely into her mic. "She's not bluffing. I swear she's not." And then the voice, male, authoritative, undeniable, spilling out of the phone into the velvet silence. "This is Lord Fenwick, chair of the International Luxury Group. We are witnessing the incident in real time. Confirm your status." The woman in orange lowered the phone slightly, but she didn't need to explain. Her gaze swept the room, slicing through silk gowns and diamond crowns alike. "You want to know who I am?" Her tone was neither boast nor plea, it was judgment. She stepped forward, her gown rippling like fire restrained, her eyes locking on the Duchess. "I am the largest shareholder of the house your family parades tonight. 42% to be exact. Every chandelier above you, every bottle of champagne poured, every coin that sustains this gala flows through me." The crowd erupted. Gasps thundered. Glasses clattered against tables. The journalist's live stream exploded with comments. "Oh my God, she owns it." The Duchess staggered back, color draining from her face. "Lies. All lies." But the voice from the phone cut her down. "Confirmed. Registry shows her controlling stake. She is indeed the principal shareholder. Any action against her is action against the house itself." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was suffocating. The guard's boot slid off the clutch, as if it had turned molten. The event manager's tablet slipped from his hands, clattering to the floor like broken glass. Nobles whispered frantically, some turning pale, others pale with shame. The woman in orange bent slowly, picking up her clutch not with haste, not with anger, but with deliberate grace. She set it gently on the podium where her name had been erased minutes earlier. "You deleted me from your list," she said, her voice cutting. but I write the lists you begged to be on." The hall erupted in gasps again, some applause breaking through, raw and unplanned. The Duchess's mask shattered. Her hand trembled, the glass of champagne tilting dangerously. And for the first time, she looked small in her own red dress. The Duchess's glass slipped. Champagne spilled across the marble, a golden stain spreading like evidence against her. For the first time all night, her silence was louder than her cruelty. The event manager stumbled backward, his velvet jacket damp with sweat. He scrambled to collect his fallen tablet, but the screen had cracked a fitting symbol for the authority he thought he wielded. I didn't know," he stammered. "We weren't told." But no one listened. The guards, once rigid in obedience, now shifted uneasily. One clasped his hands behind his back, eyes downcast, as if awaiting trial. The other whispered, voice trembling, "She owns the house. Then what have we done?" The journalist's live stream surged past 50,000 viewers. Comments flooded the screen like gunfire. "This is history. The Duchess is finished. Justice, finally." Guests who had moments earlier sneered now turned their phones away, ashamed to be recorded on the wrong side of history. A woman in emerald silk, who had mocked the CEO's gown, clutched her pearls so tightly they snapped, beads scattering across the floor like fallen pride. Then came the cracks in the noble ranks. Lord Ashton, still standing firm, raised his voice again. "What you've witnessed tonight is arrogance stripped bare. You struck her, you erased her, and you tried to drag her out of her own empire." Gasps rippled again. Other nobles nodded, some reluctantly, some with relief. A baroness whispered to her husband, "We must distance ourselves from the Duchess immediately." The Duchess spun, her eyes wild, her crimson gown now a cage rather than a crown. "You would betray me? For her? For a stranger?" The woman in orange met her gaze with a calm so absolute it crushed resistance. "Not a stranger. Your superior. The one you didn't see because you never looked past the skin, the dress, the silence." The room stilled. The truth hung heavy. The guard stepped back completely now, hands raised, as though surrendering. The event manager collapsed into a chair, head in his hands. The journalist's voice cracked as she narrated, almost in awe. "The Duchess has lost control. The crowd is turning. This is collapse in real time." And then the chant began. Low at first, from a group near the back. "Let her speak. Let her speak." It spread like a current, weaving through silks and tuxedos, climbing into the rafters. Soon, the entire hall pulsed with it. Guests, nobles, even staff. "Let her speak, let her speak." The Duchess, pale and cornered, tried to shout above it. "This is my gala, mine." But her words drowned beneath the chorus. And at the center of it all, the woman in orange stood steady, her silence still a storm, her presence now undeniable. The gala no longer belonged to the Duchess, it belonged to her. The chant thundered through the ballroom. "Let her speak, let her speak." Oh, the Duchess, once radiant in crimson, now looked cornered, her lips trembling around words that no longer carried weight. She lifted her glass as if it were a shield, but even the champagne inside trembled with her. The woman in orange finally raised her hand not to silence the crowd, but to command it. And silence fell, as if the entire room had been waiting for her permission to breathe. She stepped forward, every click of her heel echoing like a gavel. Her phone still glowed in her palm, the line to her assistant Rachel open, the board still listening. "Tonight," she began, voice low but resonant, "you struck me. You erased me. You mocked me in front of 1,000 witnesses, and you believed power would protect you." She turned, eyes locking on the Duchess, who shrank under the weight of every syllable. "But power is not gowns or titles. Power is consequence." Gasps rippled. The journalist's live stream comments exploded hearts, fire emojis, disbelief flooding in real time. The woman in orange lifted her phone higher. "Rachel, effective immediately, freeze the Duchess's line of funding. Terminate every contract under her family's name and strike her access from the House Registry." Rachel's voice crackled back, precise and merciless. "Confirmed. Accounts frozen. Contracts nullified. Registry updated. Effective now." The Duchess staggered as though struck again. Her glass slipped from her hand, shattering across marble, the spill spreading like blood at her feet. The event manager gasped. "That's 7.3 billion in assets." The woman in orange cut him off without raising her voice. 7.3 billion. Removed. Erased. Just as she attempted with me. Phones shot higher, recording every syllable. Guests gasped, some clapping, some staring in stunned disbelief. Lord Ashton nodded gravely, his words carrying across the crowd, justice delivered. Not by rage, by authority. The Duchess collapsed into a chair, hands trembling, her once fiery dress now nothing but fabric draped over ruin. The woman in orange turned away from her, not in dismissal but in declaration. She raised her gaze to the crowd. Let it be clear, this house is not a stage for vanity. It is not a shield for cruelty. It is built on dignity, and anyone who cannot honor that will find themselves erased, no matter their title. The crowd erupted applause, breaking like thunder, cheers rising above centuries of silence. The journalist's live stream surged past 100,000 viewers, comments scrolling faster than eyes could follow. Historic. She ended her. Power without shouting. The Duchess sat frozen, pale, stripped of the illusion she had worn like armor. And the woman in orange? She hadn't shouted once, yet she had just dismantled an empire. The applause roared like a storm breaking over stone. Centuries of velvet tradition, crystal chandeliers, and whispered aristocracy shook under the sound of people standing for truth. The Duchess sat motionless, her crimson dress a cage of her own making. Her family's empire, 7.3 billion, had evaporated in the span of a single command. She stared at the shards of glass at her feet, the golden spill drying across the marble, and for the first time in her life, she had no audience. All eyes were fixed on the woman in orange. She didn't bask in the cheers. She didn't bow. She simply stood at the center of the ballroom, her presence commanding more than any crown ever could. The chandeliers above her seemed to burn brighter, their light bending toward her like stars acknowledging gravity. She raised her phone one last time. Rachel, log the incident, archive every recording, and notify the press. Tonight, history rewrote itself. Confirmed, came the reply, steady and final. The woman in orange lowered the phone, then turned back to the Duchess. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It carried with the certainty of a verdict. You thought power meant a title. You thought cruelty meant control. But tonight you learned power is quiet. Power is choice. And my choice was to end you without raising my hand. Oh. The crowd gasped, some erupting into applause again, others whispering in awe. The journalist's live stream hit 200,000 viewers, comments scrolling like wildfire. This is justice. She didn't need to scream. History in orange. The Duchess lowered her head, her voice breaking. You've ruined me. The woman in orange didn't flinch. She stepped forward, her gown trailing like embers across marble. She leaned just close enough for the front rows to hear, but her words cut the entire room. Number, you ruined yourself. I was only the mirror. The silence that followed was holy, a silence thicker than stone, heavier than crowns. Then she turned away, not to flee, not to gloat, but to leave as she had entered. Calm, deliberate, undeniable. Guests stepped aside instinctively, parting like tides before her. At the doorway, she paused once, her voice carrying back through the hall like the closing of a book. You can erase a name from a guest list, but you cannot erase justice, because justice always writes itself back in. And with that, she was gone. The ballroom remained shaken, broken, redefined, the Duchess in ruin, the crowd awakened, and the world outside, watching through thousands of screens, forever changed, because dignity had spoken, and power had answered without shouting.